Everything you think you know about Frozen is wrong. It is not a harmless fairy tale about self-acceptance. It is not simply a story about two sisters repairing a fractured bond. It is not just a glittering anthem about being yourself. That is the version handed to millions of children, the safe version, the marketable version. The truth is colder. Frozen is the final stage of a myth that has been rewritten, softened, and ideologically reversed for nearly 2 centuries. Beneath its songs and snowflakes lies a story that once carried a warning about isolation, about emotional sterility, about what happens when power detaches itself from human warmth. Long before Arundel sold plastic tiaras and sang about letting go, there was another queen of ice. She did not seek self-discovery. She did not struggle with her emotions. She froze hearts. She abducted children. She ruled over a palace where feeling itself was the enemy. That queen was never meant to be celebrated. Yet today, she is a global icon. This transformation did not happen by accident. Myths do not simply evolve, they are shaped, curated, polished. When powerful institutions retell a story, they do not just update it, they redirect it. They decide which elements survive, which are amplified, and which must be buried. Frozen did not invent the Snow Queen, it inherited her, and then it changed her. To understand what was lost and what was gained, we have to go back before the merchandise, before the Broadway adaptation, before the anthem that redefined a generation, back to the original Queen of Ice, and what she truly represented. The story we were given is warm, the one beneath it is not. In 1844, Hans Christian Andersen published The Snow Queen, not as a celebration of individuality, but as a moral fable about the fragility of the human heart. When Kay is pierced by shards of a malevolent mirror, he becomes detached, mocking, frozen from within, and the Snow Queen appears, dazzling, precise, and merciless. She does not struggle. She does not evolve. She is cold because cold is her nature. The true hero is Gerda, whose love and courage melt the ice. Andersen's message is clear. Cold intellect without compassion corrodes the soul. Isolation is not empowerment. It is spiritual death. That was the Snow Queen, not a heroine, but a warning. What most readers do not know is that the Snow Queen is not a simple Danish invention. Traces of its themes stretch back centuries, far before Andersen ever put pen to paper. Scholars at the Royal Danish Library have noted striking similarities between the Snow Queen and ancient Norse myths, particularly the stories of the frost giants and the realm of Niflheim, a frozen world of fog, ice, and death. In these myths, frost was never innocent. It was a force of cosmic control, a tool used by the gods and giants alike to punish, to isolate, and to assert dominance. The Snow Queen embodies this archetype perfectly. Her palace, floating in the Arctic wasteland, mirrors Ymir's frozen world, where all life is fragile, provisional, and subordinate to power beyond comprehension. Even her name in Andersen's original manuscripts, simply Dronningen, hints at sovereignty, authority, and an almost unnatural detachment from mortal concerns. Etymology reinforces the hidden danger. Snow, in Old Norse contexts, did not just mean cold precipitation. It connoted suspension, stasis, and the freezing of vitality. The word queen, derived from the Old English quen, originally implied a woman of influence, but one whose power could bend life itself. Together, the Snow Queen becomes not a whimsical villain, but an allegory for an unfeeling system that dominates and reshapes human lives according to its own rules. Andersen may have softened the myth for a Scandinavian audience, but he could not erase its origins entirely. By embedding the story in the familiar frame of children's adventure and innocent bravery, he ensured that the psychological lesson, the danger of emotional coldness and the oppressive power of detached authority, would pass beneath the radar. Readers are captivated by the journey, the rescue, the triumph. Few notice the warning encoded in frost and isolation. The Snow Queen is a figure whose power is timeless. She is not merely a villain of fantasy, but a symbol of the enduring tension between warmth and control, compassion and authority. In her icy domain, we see the ultimate human challenge, resisting the forces that would numb us to one another. This was the Snow Queen's true origin. A myth cloaked in fairy tale, a philosophical warning frozen in story. By the time Frozen hit theatres, the story of the Snow Queen had already been travelling through centuries of retellings, reinterpretations, and ideological edits. What Walt Disney Animation Studios produced was not merely a film for children. It was the latest chapter in a long history of sanitization, of turning a story about power, fear, and rebellion into one about romance, friendship, and magical whimsy. Disney's version strips the Snow Queen of her moral and symbolic weight. Elsa, now a misunderstood princess rather than a cosmic frost sovereign, internalizes her power as a personal struggle rather than a metaphor for societal domination. Her isolation is emotional, not political. The Palace of Ice is a safe haven, not a fortress of control. Scholars from the University of Southern California School of Cinematic Arts note that Disney's adaptation reflects a consistent corporate impulse to render dangerous myths comfortable, to convert revolutionary or cautionary tales into digestible entertainment that reinforces individualist rather than systemic perspectives. This transformation is intentional. Just as Benjamin Tabart altered Jack and the Beanstalk to protect children from harsh truths about class struggle, Disney reshapes Anderson's narrative to protect audiences from the unsettling truths of power, authority, and societal control. By focusing on love and acceptance, the film neutralizes the story's original critique of detachment and absolute authority. Elsa's fear becomes psychological rather than structural. The real threat, the embodiment of icy dominance and societal imbalance, is replaced with personal misunderstanding. Even subtle elements carry this whitewashing. The trolls who guide Anna, the magical music, and the narrative of sisterly redemption all transform conflict into comfort. The Snow Queen's original warning about the dangers of emotional and societal coldness is reframed as a moral about embracing yourself. The revolution hidden in Frost is replaced by a feel-good arc. Disney's Frozen is a cultural marvel, beloved worldwide. Yet beneath its glittering surface lies a history of erasure, a chain of adaptations that dilute danger, rebellion, and philosophical weight. In softening the story, we have lost the lessons the ancients encoded in ice and isolation. The Snow Queen is no longer a force to reckon with. She is a mirror reflecting only what we are willing to accept. The story of Frozen is far older and more complex than any single book or film. Beneath Elsa's icy powers, beneath the shimmering snow and sparkling castles, lies a matrix of symbols drawn from millennia of myth. The Snow Queen, as envisioned by Hans Christian Andersen, is not merely a villainous or a misunderstood figure. She embodies elemental control, absolute detachment, and the cold authority of nature itself. Anthropologists argue that ice and snow have long served as symbols of both life and death, creation and suppression. In Siberian shamanism, the spirits of winter govern survival, scarcity, and social order. The frozen landscape becomes a mirror of power structures, showing what happens when forces above dominate those below. The etymology of the Snow Queen's very title reinforces her authority. The word queen, originating from the Old English quen, meant not only a female ruler, but also one with moral and spiritual authority. In this sense, Elsa's sovereignty is literal as well as symbolic. She is the overseer of a realm shaped by her choices, her emotions, and her isolation. Ice becomes legislation, frost becomes enforcement, and just as Jack's beanstalk represented the bridge between classes, Elsa's frozen palace represents both the unreachable upper echelon of power and the danger inherent in absolute isolation from the governed. Cross-cultural myths reinforce this reading. In Norse mythology, Skadi, the goddess of winter, descends upon humanity with both beauty and merciless impartiality. In Inuit traditions, spirits of ice determine survival and enforce rules with uncompromising precision. Anderson's story, and by extension Disney's version, borrows from this global understanding of cold as both physical and social power. The frost is not just magic. It is control, fear, and the potential for revolt. Even Anna's journey through snow-laden forests mirrors ancient hero myths. She descends into a liminal wilderness where the ordinary rules of society do not apply. There she confronts forces beyond her understanding, navigating trials that reveal hidden truths. This is not a simple tale of sisterly love. It is an allegory of confronting entrenched systems, of negotiating with forces that govern life and survival. Frozen may appear whimsical, but its mythological DNA reveals a far darker origin. Ice is never passive. It encodes control, hierarchy, and rebellion. And Elsa, like the giants of Jack and the Beanstalk, is more than a character. She is a symbol of power concentrated and the threat that comes when it is mishandled. Elsa's Heart of Ice is more than a narrative device. It is a cipher for the concentrated power of an elite few, a reflection of what happens when influence is hoarded and emotion becomes weaponized. In folklore, ice often represents barriers between the powerful and the powerless, a literal and metaphorical separation of classes and destinies. Elsa's isolation in her ice palace is not simply personal, it mirrors the structures that keep ordinary people distant from power. Scholars of comparative mythology note that in ancient tales, frozen realms are always inhabited by those who wield dominion over life and death, who enforce rules the common folk can never fully challenge. The act of Elsa unleashing her powers in a storm mirrors historical upheavals. From the fall of empires to revolutions in remote kingdoms, the breaking of natural or social order is frequently linked to a singular force no one dares control. Elsa's outburst in Arendelle is symbolic of the consequences when authority is repressed and the governed are constrained. Her frost consumes indiscriminately, reflecting both the danger of unchecked power and the fear it inspires in those below. This is not a story of petty magic, it is a coded warning. The language of frost, snow, and ice carries a deep symbolic resonance. In Old Norse sagas, snowstorms and icy landscapes were attributed to gods who judged or punished human folly. In Slavic and Inuit traditions, ice is a filter of worthiness, a test of resilience and morality. Elsa's powers, while fantastical, align with this enduring motif. They are a force beyond comprehension that demands respect and negotiation. Anna's persistent efforts to reach Elsa add another layer. They are not merely acts of familial love. They represent the negotiation between the powerful and those who are marginalized. Anna does not confront Elsa with weapons or rebellion. She confronts her with empathy, connection, and human will. In doing so, the story encodes a revolutionary truth. Lasting change requires engagement with the structures of power, not brute force alone. Frozen presents Elsa not as a villain or hero in the traditional sense. She is a representation of concentrated authority, the tension between control and chaos, and the inevitable consequences of isolation. The Icy Kingdom is a symbol, and the story becomes an allegory for power, responsibility, and rebellion that echoes through time. If Elsa represents concentrated power and isolation, Anna embodies the force of the people, the catalyst that disrupts hierarchy through persistence, courage, and connection. Her journey through the frozen landscape is more than a quest to save a sister. It is an allegory of resistance against unapproachable authority. Throughout history, revolutions and social upheavals have succeeded not merely through force, but through persistent engagement, empathy, and ingenuity. Anna is the human embodiment of that principle, the reminder that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable power, action and moral clarity can reshape destiny. Anna's journey begins with naivety, but it evolves into strategic understanding. She navigates a world built by Elsa's isolation, confronting magical barriers, societal fears, and her own doubts. Each encounter mirrors real-world obstacles faced by marginalized groups attempting to challenge entrenched power structures. The trolls, the Duke, and even Christoph's initial hesitations serve as allegorical representations of the obstacles to collective action. Anna is not invincible, she is persistent. Her greatest strength lies in her unwavering commitment to reach Elsa, to bridge the gap between the governed and the governing. Symbolically, Anna's warmth counters Elsa's cold. Heat and frost are recurring motifs in mythology. Across cultures, fire represents life, renewal, and human agency. In Greek myths, Prometheus steals fire to empower humanity. In Hindu mythology, Agni embodies transformation and destruction. Anna carries this same force. Her warmth is not destructive in the sense of harm, but transformative, capable of thawing even the most impenetrable barriers. Her acts of compassion, literally and figuratively, break the ice that isolates Elsa, allowing power to be integrated, not feared. The climax of Frozen hinges not on brute strength, but on a human connection that upends the established order. Anna's self-sacrifice is a revolutionary act. She demonstrates that courage and empathy are not weaknesses, but forces capable of dismantling oppressive structures. Through Anna, the narrative encodes a timeless lesson. Revolution is not merely conquest. It is the reclamation of agency, the reassertion of balance, and the recognition that the powerful are most vulnerable when disconnected from those they govern. Elsa's story does not end with simple triumph or personal growth. In truth, Frozen is a reimagining of centuries-old archetypes, particularly the Snow Queen, who appears in Hans Christian Andersen's 1844 tale. Unlike the sanitized Disney version, Andersen's Snow Queen was terrifying, unstoppable, and morally ambiguous, representing the cold, indifferent force of nature and the isolation that absolute power can create. Elsa inherits this lineage, but her tale has been strategically softened and repackaged for modern audiences. Beneath the glittering ice and soaring music lies a warning about the dangers of concentrated power without accountability. The etymology of her name is telling. Elsa is a derivative of Elizabeth, meaning God is my oath. Symbolically, the name suggests a divine or elevated responsibility, yet the narrative warns of the perils of unbridled authority. The etymology of frozen itself comes from Old English phreosan, meaning to become stiff or immobile. This is more than literal ice. It is a metaphor for paralysis in leadership and society, the stagnation that occurs when one withdraws from responsibility. Elsa's withdrawal into the mountains is not just personal retreat. It is political, cultural, and symbolic. The kingdom suffers because the one with power isolates herself, leaving the societal machinery vulnerable. Cross-cultural parallels abound. In Norse mythology, Skadi the Winter Queen represents both beauty and danger, a reminder that those who wield power without empathy risk unleashing chaos. In Japanese folklore, Yuki Onna is a snow spirit whose allure is deadly, indifferent to human suffering. Elsa embodies both archetypes. Her immense abilities create awe, but they also generate fear, uncertainty, and imbalance. Frozen reframes this ancient archetype as a cautionary tale, emphasizing that power must be tempered by connection, accountability, and human empathy. The modern implications are profound. In an era of technocratic elites, corporate dominance, and political polarization, Elsa serves as a mirror. Those who withdraw from engagement, who centralize influence without oversight, risk creating systems that cannot adapt and that inadvertently harm those they are meant to protect. Frozen suggests that isolation, even when motivated by fear or a desire for safety, is a dangerous form of power. Elsa is the embodiment of the world's frozen potential, a warning that absolute authority left unchecked leads not to stability, but to stagnation and crisis.